All right, so we are live. So the pipeline for that would probably include, like how to deal with scans, working with scan data, working with blend shapes, understanding blend shapes, just like the core aspects of what makes that studio works for, what works for that studio, If it was a DreamWorks certified one, it would be, something along the lines of, nerve modeling, which is insane. But it's like, which is so crazy.
But yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because I mean, companies have this with degrees all the time, right? People are graduating from animation degrees with no guarantee that they actually know anything that's worth anything to the company.
Yes.
And yeah, because there's no industry certified kind of pipeline way of doing things. It makes a lot of sense, man. Yeah. Because I mean, if DreamWorks is still doing NURB stuff, they must be having a hell of a time finding people who are comfortable with that. Huh?
No, they haven't done that they switched that I think 2 years ago. They kind of switched away from that. Yeah, very recent. Hey everybody, we're just Chris and I are just shooting the shit and waiting for everybody to trickle in. So yeah. So we'll probably just get things going in another couple minutes or so. But yeah, so that's one of the things that we want to try to figure out and see how we could establish. So I've even talked to, I say, like Luma Pictures and a couple of small and medium-sized game studios that are really interested in it. It's just figuring out how to structure it. So, but we'll see. But as I said, man, I think it's amazing. Kind of what you're doing with with the company and everything, and it's I do miss that aspect of production.
Yeah, no, it's ideal for me, man. I don't miss the big studio things because like we were saying last night, now I can sit down and have a coffee with a director and actually come up with ideas, like actually ideally starting before there's a script, and then you create a concept and you see that concept integrated into the script. It's maximizing that creativity, that flexibility that you have. And I think the way that our industry has been structured, it minimizes that, which is insane because you're pumping in all of these super creative, super talented artists, and you're saying to them, hey, yeah, you just do this tiny little thing,
Exactly.
And then we start to believe it as artists. You go, oh, okay, well that that must be all I'm good for, I'll just get modeling these feet, and I think
it doesn't work that way.
With the technology being as it is now, there's really no reason for it other than like legacy, right? That's what we were just talking about DreamWorks. It takes a long time when you've got a machine that's that big, with that many people under it. You can't just go, why don't we switch from NURBS to ZBrush, tomorrow? It doesn't.
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way. But no, I completely. There's pros and cons with both, but I completely agree. Completely agree, dude. All right, guys. It's 12 on the dot. We'll give everybody another minute or so to kind of trickle on in. How's everybody doing today? And where is everybody from?
Hello, everyone. By the way, I don't know if there's a way to see everyone that's in the room. But so I don't know who's
hear you. Well, could everybody? Could we get a nod if you guys can hear us loud and clear? I just want to get a simple yay, nay. I want to make sure you guys can hear us. All right, cool.
Are you getting responses to that, Manny? I can see the group chat window here, and I don't see any. I don't see anything in it.
Yep, they're piling in.
Okay, cool.
They're piling in. All right, cool. Austin, Barcelona, Bogota, Canada. All righty, great.
Cool.
All right,
so the guys that are here, can I just ask you to think about a thing that I guess we'll loop back to, once we've done the introduction, which is just like why you think you should study anatomy. That's not a rhetorical question. There's 1,000 answers to it. They're all correct, but my answer is, I think, different to most people. So I'm interested to get a feeling for that, because everyone has their own take on it.
Cool. So and you could, once we officially start in the next minute or so, you could ask that again. But so you're saying you're asking a question to the group, which is why they want to study anatomy.
Just why? It seems like an obvious question, but I don't think it is, or I don't think the answer is as obvious as the maybe you think it is. But I'm very this is nowadays how I start the conversation with all my anatomy students. Just why are you here? Why are you? And that's a question that we have to ask ourselves all the time anyway, right? In your day-to-day studies or your day-to-day work or whatever. Why am I doing this? If you don't know the answer to that,
you got a problem.
You might not know it yet, but you do. So
exactly. No, I think it's great. So all right, let's kick it off. Hey everybody, my name is Manny. Thank you for joining us for another live session. We are here with Christian Bull, who is a lead modeler, producer, art director, sculptor, a little bit of everything. But more importantly, he's just amazing at it. So as you guys know, it's like if you have any questions, we already have screened a few questions prior to the session that came from you guys during the enrollment process. But if you have any additional questions, definitely feel free to throw them up on the chat, and I'll try my best to go through all of them. If you guys experiencing a lower res video, definitely take advantage of the YouTube option at the bottom of your screen. If you click that, it will be streaming the session through YouTube, and you could set a higher resolution. But I'm just going to shut up, and I'm going to let Christian introduce himself and give us a little bit about his background. Take it away, Christian.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Manny, for a very generous introduction. So where do I start? With the introduction, I just I want to, I saw the bio beforehand, and I just want to mention that because that has me down as lead modeler on John Carter and Man of Steel. I was shot sculpt supervisor on John Carter, and on Man of Steel, I sculpted the Digidouble, right, the Henry Cavill Superman, and then I moved off it onto another show. So the lead on that was Marcus Schmidt. So I just, I don't want to take credit away from where credit's due. So about myself, I supervise. Nowadays I do mostly concept, and then I supervise that through to final delivery. My background was I had a degree in animation, and then this was like I did my degree 12 years ago maybe, and so that was when digital sculpting was just becoming a thing, right? ZBrush was just you were able to actually do stuff with it. So that's when I went to the Florence Academy of Art and studied sculpture and drawing there for a while, and then worked in games and things for a while before going to DNEG as initially a senior character artist, and then like you say, lead modeler and lead sculptor and whatever, and then since then left there so that I could focus on my own thing, which is now 6 years down the line culminated in me having my own company, Screenplay Effects, and doing this thing that maybe we'll talk a little bit about, which is really doing concept and then supervising that through to delivery. I'll supervise the modeling or do the modeling, texturing, look dev, rigging for whatever it takes. As well, I teach clay sculpture at the Barcelona Academy of Art, teach anatomy there, of course, teach anatomy for CGMA. And what else? Like you say, a whole bunch of things, which are going to seem like it's a whole bunch of disparate elements, like I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but that's not the case. What I want to talk a little bit about today is how that all plugs into the beating heart of what I do as an artist, and the way that I teach, and the way that I approach teaching, the way that I approach sculpture, the way that I approach anatomy. And this is, something that we'll talk more about, I guess. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question as to the way I am or what I do, but it gives the flavor.
Exactly. And thanks for that, Christian. So I guess we'll kind of just go into it with giving us just an overview of your approach, on anatomy. And kind of also showing us some of your work as well.
So the question that I asked, guys who have just come since the session started might not have heard us talking about it, but whoever was in the room, I asked, why study anatomy? And this is now my jumping off point that I ask all students. And Manny, do you have some answers there? Like, have some people typed in any answers?
I think when we first mentioned that, we didn't formally roll it out, so that on there now.
I don't know how the sound quality is, by the way, Manny. You've gone a little bit crackly, a little bit echoey.
Okay, hold on, give me 1 second. I don't think any of the settings on my end. Is it still pretty bad?
I think it's okay. I mean, as long as it's like I can hear you, as long as it's fine for the people watching, then it's fine by me.
Okay, cool. So the question is, guys, why are you studying anatomy? So list your questions in the chat, and we'll kind of go through that. We have a couple coming in, which is to understand underlying structure and range of motion. It definitely another one is definitely helps me animate better. I'm studying anatomy to make my characters look more alive. It's beautiful, also important to understand in order to create believability.
Yeah, these are all really good answers, actually. Like, so the standard answers that I'm expecting are like, you need to be able to understand something if you're going to draw it or if you're going to sculpt it. And guys, I teach in an atelier, right? So there we have an academic method where you are taught to be able to copy something precisely, exactly. And if you study there for 1, 2, 3 years, you're going to be able to do that. Like, you can open up the hood of a car and copy everything exactly without understanding a single thing about it. And that's as a character artist, a very, very important skill that has nothing to do with anatomy, right? I have to be able to represent something exactly, right? So we were talking about Man of Steel before. So obviously the digi-double of Man of Steel has to look exactly like Henry Cavill. Anything less is a failure for the studio. So that's a very important skill, but that's not why we need to study anatomy, because you can fake it. If you have a good eye and you have a model, you can do an exact copy that makes it look like you have control of the anatomy. And this is, people don't believe it. People think, oh, you have to study anatomy. No, you don't. So for me, the answers that you guys were saying, like especially the guys talking about animation, that's plugging into my way of thinking about it very much. Because when I first started teaching anatomy, that was at DNEG, on John Carter, where that was the biggest creature show that DNEG has ever done. So they figured it was pretty important to teach the creature guys anatomy. And the animators as well. So I was teaching anatomy for animators and having to think about that in terms of function, and not in terms of like you open up your book and then you copy like, the pectoralis and the abs, and you get a kind of flavor for them and convince yourself that you know it, but you don't. And this is the killer for me as an anatomy teacher, right? I trying to convince students who've studied a little bit of anatomy that they don't know it. And that's not an ego thing. I don't want to be like, what, you don't know about the anconaeus muscle? Man, you don't know shit. Sorry, man. I don't know if I can swear on this. But,
you're good.
Thank you. Okay. But yeah, it's not about that. It's for me, the process of studying anatomy leads you down a very profound path, I think. So and let me just start to bring stuff up on the screen so we can at least have something for you guys to look at. But okay, so Manny, take like baseball, for example, because you're American, so I presume you have some sort of understanding of that game and how it works, right?
I'm going to say I'm more of a football guy, but yeah, go ahead. Give it a shot.
Okay, well, let's and by football, I presume you mean American football and not...
Yes, of course. Yeah, no soccer for me here.
Soccer, which is actually football. Okay,
exactly. So and also, Christian, before you continue, is the audio better on my end, or is it about the same?
Yes, no, you're perfect now. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so perfect that I forgot that there was ever a problem.
Okay, guys, everything good on your end as well in terms of the audio? Just want to make sure, Ryan, Ken, everything is. You guys are hearing me loud and clear.
All good.
It's I don't know why sometimes there's a delay in the chat. It's like, and then it's gonna come flooding in when everybody's like, yeah, great, yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Yep. All right. Cool.
We're good. Cool. So, let's run with American football as a thing, right? Because that's a sport that I know nothing about, like really nothing. So if I'm looking at that, I guess like they have to take the ball from one end to the other, right?
Yeah.
So I can appreciate it on that level. I can go, well, those guys have got the ball closer there, and now they're really close, so that's good for that team. Whereas like you're looking at it and you're seeing 1,000 different things. Like this guy's running around the back because he knows that if that play messes up, then something else is going to happen, and then he's got that covered and whatever. Hopefully, I'm sounding like
no, you're good. You're good.
Like my hypothetical guy who makes sense. Yeah. So basically, the point is really that we're looking at the same thing, right? But you are getting 10 times, 100 times the amount that I'm getting, right?
Yes.
So you talk about that in anatomical terms. You know, if I'm stood in front of a live model with my students and they haven't studied anatomy, we're spending maybe 3 hours in front of that. I am stealing the whole time. The whole time my visual library is getting fuller and more complete and more rounded, and they're not. And I was already ahead to start with, you know. So it's giving me a tool set. So this is part of it. But the difference between creating artwork, which films, games, as well as sculpture and painting are, and sport, is that artwork always comes down to storytelling, right? And this is why I'm very happy to have animators here, because I think that, you know, those guys will understand it as much as anyone. But, you know, in animation, all of us can understand how that is story. But the same thing in the figure, right? If I'm doing a sculpt of a figure, of course it's storytelling, because if it's not, it's just a sculpt of a figure. And nowadays, if I want to, I could just scan that figure in and print it out, right? And that's no story there. So let me start making some marks to kind of illustrate this idea a little bit. So let's say we take an arm, right? And just a layman's idea of an arm is, you know, two sort of equally sized segments with very sort of symmetrical repeating curves through here, and then like a hand bolted onto the bottom of it. So here you can see you can see that it's an arm. You know, it has the symbolic representation of an arm. But if I am able to ask the question, and this is what I'm trying to get into my students all the time, of what questions are you asking when you're studying anatomy? And if I ask, if I open up my anatomy book and ask the question, where do you give me juxtaposition, right? This is the heartbeat of story, is contrast, right? Black against white, a guy trying to achieve a goal, and there's an obstacle in his way. This is, you know, so in animation, a curved line playing off against a straight line, for example, right? So where do I find that? And you know, the story of nature in general, because all the stuff that we talk about, you could learn from a leaf, and you could learn from a horse, but the human body is a sensible entrance into this world, because we're kind of familiar with it. So the what we're trying to capture when we talk about nature is generally, let's say, ordered chaos, or chaotic, you know, or like, yeah, variety and chaos, or order and chaos, you know, these ideas. So basically here we have variety, order, right? We have one shape, the exact same repeated shape, and a similar shape here, all running off a straight line. So we know that nature won't give us that. We know that nature has enough chaos built into it that it will not accept. It will accept repeating ideas, but not identically repeating patterns. So what happens when we look at an arm? What happens when we break it down? Well, the arm's comprised of 3 bones, right? If we ignore the hand, humerus, radius, and the ulna. Humerus, about 1.5 heads high, you know, are rough proportions. So we take let me carve this in. We don't need Photoshop when we've got a basic plane. So here's the humerus, right? Very simple representation of this. And we say this is 1.5 heads. The radius and the ulna, about a head, you know, ulna's going to be a little bit longer. So something like this. So what we've got immediately is two ideas that are similar but disagreeing, right? Because it's not the same length and it's not the same axis. Right here, this is all on the same axis. What happens on the arm is at the elbow, boom, that axis breaks. So straight away, just with this idea, the foundation that we have here is going to be much more strong for creating a drawing or a sculpture off. I talk a lot about gesture when I'm sculpting or when I'm teaching or when I'm drawing. Gesture is essentially the big movement, the big rhythms. Here you have no gesture. Here, what you have, boom, you've got gesture straight away. Then, incidentally, if we were to get onto the legs, right, femur, a long bone, right, 2 heads high, the longest long bone in the body. So if that's 1.5, then the femur is going to be a little bit longer. And then tibia and fibula, like 1.6, 1.7 heads high, something like this. Now look here, boom, boom, that's breaking that way. Here, bang, bang, that's breaking that way. What we have is a repeating idea, right? One long bone with 2 bones attached. One long bone with 2 bones attached. The 2 ones that are attached are slightly shorter, and we have an angle break. But what we don't have is the same idea, the same thing repeated. The angle break each time is slightly different, right? So these things are, I can talk about it in an arm, right, or in a leg, but it's in everywhere. It's in everywhere in the body. I can take a fingernail and break it down in this way and find the story of the fingernail. But in order to do that, I have to know what questions to ask. I have to know how to approach it, because if I just try and memorize everything, and this is how I tried to approach anatomy when I first started studying it, because I didn't know any other way. So I got Paul Rocher's Artistic Anatomy, and I drew every single plate out of it, which helped me to an extent, and helped my drawing skills. But I didn't know the questions to ask, and I would have come out of that thinking, yeah, sure, I know anatomy, but I would know it in an almost medical way, right? And that doesn't help me with concepts. It doesn't help me with figurative sculpture. It helps me very, very little. Whereas as soon as I know the questions to ask, as soon as I'm actively hunting for the personality of things, the story of things, man, that's a different world. That's a different world. And this is what I'm always trying very hard to get my students to understand, because otherwise, man, anatomy is a dry subject, right? You go, okay, deltoid, right, that originates from the final third of the clavicle, and it also originates on the spine of the scapula through here, inserts nearly halfway down the deltoid. You're just memorizing these things that your brain doesn't want to memorize. But man, stories. So, like, for example, let's throw biceps on here. Now, most people, 99% of people, go, right, well, I know the biceps, man. The biceps comes down here like that, right? Sort of, but when you're looking at that and go, wait, that is the same axis as the humerus. Will nature ever give me something that convenient? No, of course it won't. Of course it won't. And if you disregard nature to that extent, if you have that much contempt for it, it will show in your sculpt, and you will go, people will react to it and go, yeah, it's an okay sculpt, but it lacks life, right? That's the key thing, because you're not capturing the essence of that order and the chaos playing off against each other. So the biceps, for example, it's originating from the coracoid process. It's a little bit of the scapula. If this was the scapula, it's coracoid process through there. It's originating from there. It's grabbing hold of the radius through there. That means that it has an angle like that, right? It doesn't follow the angle of the humerus. It's a small point, and it's a kind of thing that would be really, really difficult to spot if you're approaching it from a very mindless point of view. If you're just going, okay, let me copy this, because naturally you will tend towards very safe, let's say abs, right? This is a very safe construction. This is what our immediate idea of abdominals is, right? Because we as human beings want to tend towards safety. We want to hide away from the scary elements of nature, right? Chaos, because that's a storm. That's a tiger that's going to rip your face off. So what we do in our representation of that is we make, time and time again, I see very, very upright figures. Let's say a human body from the side, so often like represented something like this, but what we have is like the rib cage really angling forwards, the hips angling back, the legs pushing forward and back. So we have boom, this movement, this line that never stops dancing. But in order to embrace that, we have to steer ourselves away from our natural tendencies of making safe forms. And so yeah, with the biceps, this is the smallest thing in the world, but your final sculpt or your final drawing, final painting, whatever it is made up of 10,000 of these little decisions. If those 10,000 are not motivated by the right questions, then it's 10,000 ways that you're just slightly led off path, And we can take the biceps, by the way, and break it down much further, right? So let's say we want to finish it like this. No, it doesn't finish like that. It goes down further on the inside, right? So again, people will construct it here and they will finish it at 90 degrees to the bone. No, it's got an angle to it. Okay, and then from the side, we'll go, oh, well, it's got a fairly even curve. By the way, guys, C curve like this, right? A curve that is symmetrical on both sides. I'll tell you this now, this is going to kill your work. So anytime when you have a curve, just make sure that it's not an even C curve, because maybe in a stylistic representation you can get away with it, but when you're trying to create organic and believable stuff, you can't have a symmetrical curve, basically, right? Do whatever you want with the curves. You can get just so much personality with just playing with these ideas, but never a C curve. Anyway, so naturally people will look at the biceps like that. No, the biceps, boom, turns to tendon at the end, so we get that little drop off. And then for some reason, the biceps has a dip in the middle, right? And then here's where it's tucking underneath the deltoid. So this is actually the curve of the biceps. That dip, by the way, I don't know why it causes it. And I'm sure that there are people who know why it is, but look at guys who worked with anatomy, right? Artists. Look at Michelangelo. Look at Rubens. Look at Rodin. They knew this, right? Look at the Greeks. You find that little dip in there, and the odds of you finding that, if you're not looking for it, are tiny, tiny, tiny. But once you know the questions, once you go in, wait, how do I break the sweetness of this biceps curve? What more can you offer me, right? Then you're demanding something, right? So then you have questions to bring to your anatomy book, because as a teacher, if I'm just teaching you what's in a book, it's cheaper to get a book, and you can then do it in your own time without me forcing you and giving you really difficult assignments. So so yeah, this I know is a long answer, but this is the heart of the way that I teach. Like I say, it comes initially from teaching anatomy to animators, because I can't go like, right, okay, memorize every single so through here, sorry, we'll be going this way. We'd have the flexor mass, right? So so many forearm muscles going into the hand. Once upon a time, I tried to teach it like this. I tried to go, right, well, let's see. You've got the flexor digitorum superficialis, you've got the flexor digitorum profundus, you've got the flexor carpi ulnaris, and just listing off all of these things. And no one remembers, but no one needs to either, like, especially as an animator. But I think, no, I'm not especially as an animator, sorry. Everyone really should think of it just in basic mechanical functional terms, right? So so we have our hand through here, and if we want to flex this hand, right? So to bend it towards the face, what we need is, like, a bone. All a bone has is a point of origin, a point of insertion, right? And it pulls the point of insertion to the point of origin. And in the process, so this is our bone, our muscle, in its normal state, as it pulls the point of insertion to the point of origin, it gets shorter and fatter, and it compresses, it gets shorter and fatter. That's it, man. That's you look at the most complex facial expression, you look at the most complex movement in the body, it's done in this linear motion. So so very important to understand that anatomy at its heart is very simple. And I think I would be doing a disservice if I was to teach anatomy through complexity by going, oh, look at all these muscles that I know, look at all these interesting little details of muscles that I know. That's really not important. It's basic, very basic body mechanics. So we want to bend the hand towards the face. And then basically all we need is a muscle with a point of origin here and a point of insertion on the hand, right? It pulls that point to that point, and it pulls the palm towards the face. So take the flexor mass. That's originating, all of the flexor muscles of the forearm are originating from this bump on the humerus there, and they're either inserting into the wrist or into the body of the hand. And then if your hand is pulled towards your face, you kind of need a muscle that's going to do the opposite. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in that position for the rest of your life, right? So you need a muscle that's going to do the opposite. Where would you put that? I would put it on the back of the hand, right? So so then when it pulls, if you look through this, right? Let's say we're looking at the front of the hand here. If you look through it and look at the back, bump, there's going to be muscles originating from here going into the back of the hand, and when they pull that point to that point, they extend the hand again. And this, as an idea, by the way, is all you need to know to understand 90% of what's going on with the forearm muscles, which when I was initially studying, took me, I don't know how long I spent studying those, but they're all doing pretty similar things, and they're all grouped in certain ways. So then I can go, right, okay, that's it. Now what else? What else? Now from a story point of view, juxtaposition, contrast, what can you give me, right? And then, this will give me 1,000 things, right? Sorry, guys, I'll finish this thought very quickly and then get on to questions. So, right, deltoid, let's say deltoid doing something like this, triceps, boom, coming out like this, ridge muscles coming up here, and then, this basically on the outside of the arm, this line never stops dancing, right? On the inside of the arm, much more graceful, much softer, more fluid movement. So you contrast this against this line, and that's where you get your life. That's where you get your juxtaposition. But you can only get that by demanding it. And incidentally, you go onto the leg and you go, right, leg, you're similar to the arm, but you're not the same. So what do you give me? Well, what the leg gives you is the opposite. Leg gives you long, soft movements on the outside, boom, crazy, very lively movements on the inside. Same idea, just revert it, because nature will always give you those repeating ideas, but they're going to inject that chaos into that, and that's what pulls it to life. So so there you go. That's the longest answer in the world to the question of why study anatomy, right?
Exactly. But no, I think you definitely nailed it. The visuals are a little hard to make out at times. But I think people for the most part gotten it. So
okay, yeah, let's Manny, if you're all right with it, I can talk through some visual examples of stuff that I've done. But
yeah. I think that would definitely we could just kind of just show a couple of the stuff you've done, and also I know we spoke about you kind of just sculpting something as you're answering some of the questions. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd want to do that. So and I'd kind of like to open the floor if anyone's got a part of the body that they'd like to see sculpted or to understand a little bit more, and I want to do that and talk about it in these terms of functional anatomy and believable storytelling, I guess. So
cool. Yeah. So guys, if you guys have any, Christian is taking requests as it relates to what he's going to be sculpting as he's answering some of the questions. So if you guys have any suggestions in terms of part of the body, arm, forearm, it's like chest, whatever you guys would like to see sculpted, Christian could do that as he's taking some of these answering some of these questions. So while that comes in, Christian, you could show some of your work, and also we have tons of questions in the queue that we'd like to get to as well.
Okay, cool. So yeah, let me run through some stuff quickly. So what you're looking at here, this was I ran these sculpture classes at DNEG where we'd have the model there for 3 hours, and so do gesture sculpting. Incidentally, I did a demonstration at the Florence Academy a few years ago, and did a tutorial on gesture sculpting. You can find it somewhere. It's on Vimeo. If you Google my name and Google that, then there's a kind of two-hour tutorial talking through all of this kind of stuff. But I think let's see. I want to talk about this briefly because this is like I say, I started my teaching career at DNEG, teaching anatomy to the guys there, and John Carter was this kind of pivotal show that in so many ways influenced the way that I do things. And my role there, well, I spent a year on sculpting the faces. It was me, Marcus Schmidt, and Marco De Luca. Did all the facial work in the show. And then the second year after that was I had a team of like 13 sculptors. And we went through every shot in the film and did this to it, right? So you see there, that's what the rig gets you, because you can't make a rig that animators aren't going to break, right? And they need to break it, especially with a director like Andrew Stanton. So you end up with stuff like that, and then we take that and do that to it, this kind of really got me thinking about, well, why do we spend a year on a rig? I mean, a lot of places wouldn't spend that long, of course. Normally, about a month is a safe amount for a character rig. Some places would do it in a few days, but and that's where I lean very strongly towards now, by the way, is having a rig that is very quick and run off shapes, and then for the shots that matter, where they're not blurry, you just go in there and you just give it some love, and that, by the way, is also the secret to very high level creature effects work. Is studios, I think, do themselves a disservice because they always talk about the software and the pipeline they've used to get there, but generally what it is you just, for those shots that matter, you really give them love by not only resculpting them by hand, also retexturing if you need. If there's fur, the groom will be a bespoke groom just for that shot. And that's how you get the result. It's there's a lot of clever technology that goes into it, but you can't art direct with technology. So yeah, I thought I'd show that, and no one watched that film. Go and watch it. It's not the worst thing in the world. And yeah, there was and have a look at the anatomy, and it's not bad.
Yeah, cool.
So
are you doing? It's basically you doing like corrective shapes after the fact.
Yeah, well, it's yeah, I guess it's essentially corrective shapes, yeah, except that it's not loaded into the rig. So what you'd have is yeah, because you would also, for this shot, for example, I'd have one sculpt that would be the main fix, the main making stuff work, and then also, like, because I know the deltoids are under tension there, I would be sculpting tension shapes for the deltoids and animating those by hand. And yeah, that's what I do, like, all the time now. There's a film I'm working on at the moment that has shot in it that I've had a couple of other guys working on, but I'm essentially doing it myself. And the final shot of the film is this big climactic shot of this semi-nude guy spreads his arms and takes a jump. And all of the subtle movement, all of the muscle twitching, all of the motion of the scapula, all of that kind of stuff, that's all happening. The rig was a quick, like, 5-day rig or something like that. All of that sexiness is happening in the sculpt, which is where I think that's where I think it should be. There are riggers who are very, very anatomical. Dave Short, who's now at Weta, I think, had I remember being, he understood, for example, that the foot articulates in 3 places. Most people don't know that. So you just get a rig with a single bone in the foot. He was the first person I saw that tried to do an anatomically correct one. But those guys, most of them have to just rig day in, day out, not model. So for me, like, for the final result to be a hodgepodge of rigging and animation and just whatever else, like simulation smashing into that thing, that's heartbreaking, because we sculpt it in like a T pose, right? And then you hope that end result is going to look as it's going to have the quality that you put into it at the start. No, man, no. So
I think that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. In terms of I'm sorry, go ahead, Christian.
Well, just saying that shot that I was mentioning that I'm working on now, like, yeah, I'm doing all of that myself, and that's the sort of thing that, like, I mean, one amazing thing through teaching, right, and through the teaching at CGMA is that these kind of sculpts that I do, and I'm conscious of the time, I really should get onto sculpting something. I have to sculpt an arm like 10 times a week, right? So I actually. This is the key to learning it, by the way. I through teaching it improved massively because I don't just do one perfect sculpt. I do 100 sculpts to give an idea. So sorry, let me move on quickly because I want to talk.
Yeah, so for the demo, I think it's like we had a mix of everything, but I think, as you know, a couple of people mentioned the knees, and then a couple of people mentioned lower leg. So I said let's combine those.
Yeah. Okay. So time me on this. Give me 10 minutes or something, and we'll see where we're at. Okay. Turn you off, and remind Manny, you got to rein me in, man, if I'm talking too much.
No, it's all good. So as you're sculpting that, some of the questions that we've had is and I know you've covered a couple of different components of it, but if you're to kind of list it off, what would you say would be the top three things, the top three keys to create believable anatomy?
Work from reference. So like this guy is, I mean, this is a fairly, like, I do this with my clay students, and I do it with whatever time I can get. So I don't get to spend much time on it, but like I mentioned before, as I'm doing something like this, I'm stealing. I'm going, right, what is it about your scapula that I haven't seen before? Boom, right, I'm taking it, and maybe I'm using it another time. So of course, not everyone has access to do models, but working from reference. 2, throw your reference away, man. Get rid of that. It's you got to do both, right? Because when you have your reference there, you're convincing yourself that you know stuff that you don't know. So yeah, you need to do both. So like, you do a speed sculpt, give yourself an hour, 3 hours, whatever it is, to do a section of the body or the whole body. And what you can't do, that's what you don't know. So cool. Be honest with yourself in that regard, because very, very easy to convince yourself that you know stuff, and again, like having to do a demonstration like this is perfect training. This is this is what I would recommend you do, even as a student. And then when you realize, oh, okay, that's what I don't know, then you go and study that, and then you test yourself again. So it becomes an iterative process. By the way, guys, what I'm doing just here is this is the patella, right? This is the top of the femur. This is the top of the tibia. We have this little bone down here. Well, I say little bone. This little area. This is the top of the fibula. So the knee is all about bone, right? If we're talking about structure, we're talking about story. We're talking about the things that we're looking for. To tell the story of the knee, we need to understand bone, and we need to understand tendon. And generally, that's the idea at joints, is because the muscle turns the tendon as it crosses over the joints, leaving us with bone and tendon. So this is what I'm starting with, is finding these bones, the patella, starting just at the top of the tibia through here. And basically, I'm looking for 5 bony points through here. The tibia will have an extra little one down here, and we've got the head of the fibula there, right? Guys, you don't need to remember any of this. I'm just going to talk you through my thought process through here. So the first thing that I'm grabbing hold of is bone, because the story of the knee is very much dictated by bone. If you're asking me about the thigh, then it would be very much dictated by fat and muscle. Oh, but as I've got my bones pretty much roughed in through here, just reminded myself when I mentioned fat, the patella has a beard of fat like this, right? Something like this. This is protecting the front of the knee joint. Right? We have fat also at the back of the knee joint, again, for protection. The front has the patella to protect it, the back doesn't. So we have a whole bunch of fat through here. This is the kind of fat that even as a skinny person you're going to have, because the body's going, well, I'm not letting go of that, because then my knees are suspect to you might get an arrow in the knee. So I'm conscious as I'm sculpting this of the story that I'm telling. When I have bone, right, I want to make that really sharp. I over exaggerate it. I make it more sharp than it is in reality, because I can always go back from there. When I have fat, I make it really soft, because that's the nature of fat, right? And then this is all fat through here, but the quadriceps tendon is coming over here, and it's holding that in place a little bit, which breaks that a little bit. Comes over here, grabs hold of that. So
cool. And there was a third point you mentioned in terms of the keys to creating believable anatomy. You first said you should you use reference. The second was throw away your reference. And what was the third?
Oh yeah, I never got onto a third. Well, that'll get you most of the way.
Yeah.
No, I think I think is yeah. One important thing I think is it's similar to the idea of throwing away your reference, but it's not. It's so you have like 3 stages to learning, right? Bruce Lee phrased this as, before I started training, to me, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick, right? And then I learned and I realized that it wasn't. You know, a punch has so much technique to it, and a kick could be a side kick or a roundhouse kick or a teep or whatever. And then the final stage was, then I understood. And once more, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. And in I think in anything, but in anatomy, you have the same journey, right? So once you are comfortable with your understanding of the anatomy, then probably what's going to happen is everything's going to be really, really anatomical. So you know, you're going to want everyone to know that, you know, so this mass that I'm sculpting through here, it could just be a mass, or it could be semimembranosis, semitendinosis, gracilis, sartorius. That's going to be a little bit wider. I want everyone to know that I know all of this stuff, so I'm going to make it really, really obvious. And then you end up with a figure that feels like he's, you know, got no skin, or he's just a very unnatural sort of thing, right? So since we're talking about believable anatomy here, you see here, it's not immediately it's not believable, right? And there's a few things causing this. One is that I've created 3 lines that are doing the same thing, right? This, you know, I hope you know, because I talked about it long enough, is not what nature is going to give us, right? It's going to give us that variety. Now, sometimes you do have structures that are kind of running side by side and doing similar things, but there'll be a bit of fat over part of it, or there'll be a bit of nerve ending or whatever, so it won't look the same. So here I'm just looking to find ways to break this, so that even though conceptually I've got these same 3 things happening underneath, you can't see it. And so this is the final point: is once I understand this area, then I have the courage to lose it. And that's crucial, I think. And so many, I think, very, very talented guys sometimes lack that fortitude, and that's going to damage you from a storytelling point of view, because if everything is tense, then you don't get the juxtaposition, right? You've got to play off ideas. You've got to, if you're doing a charcoal drawing and you want a bit to look more black, but you've made that thing as black as you can go, then stick some white next to it. Boom, suddenly it's more black. You know, and so, you know, in the same way through here, if you have everything really tense, you can't tell the story of relaxation, and then you can't tell the story of a pose, for example. And people will feel tense looking at your sculpt, because we're human and we react to other humans being tense, right? You go into a room of tense people, you're going to feel that. So, so yeah, the final stage is having the courage and the comfort to let it go. And when I say final stage, I don't mean like, oh yeah, after 10 years you can make your sculpt feel, you know, a bit more relaxed, a bit more naturalistic. No, I just mean that, you know, once you know what's happening under the surface, that's great. You know, you've got nothing to prove to anyone else. So let it go, unless it's adding to the story that you're trying to tell. So potentially, you know, if this was a very tense, you know, maybe if this leg was holding all of the weight, then maybe I'd find a little bit more through there. And if it was a relaxed leg, you know, like here, for example, this pose is a contrapposto, meaning that the weight is carried on one leg, the other leg is relaxed. So the hips are going one way, the rib cage going another. The reason for that is it creates story in the body. This leg is tense, this leg is relaxed. Those 2 forms will be telling very different stories. This arm is up, this arm is down. So, you know, straight away you have juxtaposition and story working through the body.
Cool. This is I'll have tons of questions, but this is you've answered to some extent, which is anatomy something that should be studied every day to really get a grip of the complexity of the human form?
Should it be studied every day? It's I don't know. I think if I said no, I can't say yes to that, because, you know, I don't study it every day. So, I mean, if I was a student, do I study it every day? I'm at least aware of it every day. That's the difference, I think. You know, yeah. If I'm studying it every day, there's a danger that I'm gonna lose my love for it. I'm gonna lose my passion for it, because it's gonna seem like a chore. So, So it's not so much the studying of anatomy. Of course, if you study anatomy every day, your anatomy will get much better than if you study it once a week. But it's more like once I know the questions, then anytime, then I'm not necessarily studying it all the time, but I'm aware of it all the time. Like for example, we will generally study anatomy from very, very muscular models, right? And we're to do like Hulk style sculpts and things like that, and that's very, very useful. But who gets left behind is the old people, because they're amazing because they generally don't have much fat, because if they did, they would have died off earlier, and so that means that they have very defined muscles, and the skin is very loose and it falls into all of those crevices. So you want to study the anatomy of a neck, forget like the Schwarzenegger type guys, because they're, well, maybe Schwarzenegger nowadays, but Schwarzenegger back in the day, his skin was so tight, it got pulled over the forms, you couldn't see that much in his neck, right? But then you go to the cafe, you look at this old woman sat opposite from you, and you're like, Jesus, there it is. There's levator scapulae, omohyoid, splenius capitis, anything that I could ever want is right there, and I take it. Not literally, but in my head, I take it and keep it.
Cool. So someone is asking, Roman is asking, do you prefer sculpting in T pose or in a more relaxed A pose?
I hate all of those poses, man. I hate them. So the more relaxed A pose. Well, I suppose like for production, certainly the more relaxed pose. But really for production, I go to the rigger and I say, what do you want? And hopefully what will end up happening is that ultimately, I will sculpt whatever they want, but then hopefully I get to sculpt the poses later on, and I get to sculpt the final shot. So then it really doesn't matter, whether I'm sculpting in a T pose or an A pose. So there's technical considerations there. Purely from an artistic point of view, a T pose or an A pose will kill you stone dead. And there are differing schools of thought on whether or not you're on your show reel, you should have your models in that pose so that you can see. I was going to do a lower leg, right? Let me start to mass some of this out. So some people will say like, right, okay, yeah, you're doing your show reel. What you want is clear, like production-ready models, right? So they're in a T pose, they're in A pose. You can see the topology, all of that kind of stuff. But the problem is so if we talk about priority. Right, I was talking about the bones before. Bones more important to study than muscles, much more actually, because that's what gives you your proportions. That's what gives you your big gesture. When we were talking about the arm and the leg before, and looking at how the humerus breaks its direction to go in the radius and the ulna, that's the gesture, right? The muscles sit on top of that, so naturally they're secondary in terms of proportion, and so in terms of importance. So what you have is a kind of like chain of command, I guess, where you have your primary movements, your primary forms, and then your secondary, tertiary, and so on. And everything is dependent on the primary forms, right? So let's say I do a design, right? If that's the worst design in the world, it doesn't matter if I have the best animator in the world on it. Then my design will look good, because animation trumps the design, right? Because they will be putting in poses that are going to make it work. And conversely, if I do the best design in the world and it has the worst animator in the world, it's not going to work, Or if the story of the film is no good, then none of our work matters, because that trumps all of that. So, I know my place in that hierarchy, and it's not at the top as a concept artist or as a modeler. And so as someone, if you're putting together a showreel thing, I just, as soon as you have that T pose, then remember your pose is going to read more than your anatomy. It doesn't matter how subtle, how amazing your anatomy is, and people will be able to appreciate it. But ultimately, as soon as you stick it in some sort of pose, right, then that gives you a little bit or a lot more boomf. So, and I see a lot of this. I've seen maybe not the best quality representations, copies done from old master sculptures that have received, like, people go, this is amazing, and I'm looking at it going, I understand the response to that. When I look at it, the quality of the sculpting isn't good, but they've taken a pose that really works and they've worked with that. And that means that it's going to read better than a T-pose sculpted much, much better, because the most important beat, the pose, is better. So so for production point of view, it's whatever the riggers want. It's really, you have to keep those guys happy. And by the way, like a lot of my students worry about getting a job in industry and how good they have to be. You got to be pretty good, but you also got to be able to work in a team and able to communicate. Those things don't really get spoken about, but if you can make the rigger happy, if you can make the animator happy, that's half of being a good modeler. Or if you can do a concept that isn't going to make absolutely everyone in the world like cry because it's so difficult to deliver, then that's a useful asset to have as a concept guy. So not anatomy, but I think worth mentioning.
Cool. And so we have another question regarding your course that you teach with CGMA. So what skill level do you need to be at in order to take the course?
Oh, it's any, man. I mean, yeah, I think thinking I don't remember how long we've been running that course, man. A couple of years, but we've really hit every skill level. Some guys with very little experience, either in ZBrush or in sculpting, and some guys that I'm looking at going, okay, I can find some things to talk about on your sculpt, but god damn, you're good, And it doesn't matter. Like the course is not a technical. I've just realized that I've sculpted a right lower leg on a left upper leg. This is an important lesson for you guys. This is I was just testing to see whether anyone would catch that, and you didn't. So make sure you enroll into the course. No, so yeah, so the level of technical ability, whether it's sculptural technical ability or understanding of the software, isn't that important. Of course, you have to have enough understanding of the software to do a sculpt, but that's really it. We're focusing on anatomy, and you take it at your own pace, I guess. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of videos. It's a lot of hours of talking, and it's a lot of homework. But the guys who are slower move slower. The guys who are very quick, they'll generally do a male and a female, or they'll do a post sculpt that runs side by side. So it's it's very flexible from that point of view.
Okay, cool. And how would you approach creature sculpting, anatomy for a creature versus anatomy for a human?
I wouldn't. I don't think I'd break it down like that. So when I'm doing a creature, or when I'm doing a human, it's back down to story again, man. What is this thing's heartbeat? Let me bring up. Let's see. Okay, let me talk about this guy quickly. And this isn't for a feature. This is, and I don't know how to get rid of you.
I'm gonna time you at 3 minutes on this, Christian.
Yeah, Jesus, we've got. Can we overrun it all, Manny?
Yeah, we could overrun it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this guy basically, the brief for him is he's a robot that is kind of only like 10 years in the future. So he's clunky as anything, man. Like you look at the Boston Dynamics robots now, and they're amazing, but because they don't fall over. But Jesus, they look like you're put together in a shed. Although I know it's millions and millions of dollars of technology, right? So that's this guy's story. Everything has to point towards that. Now, in terms of anatomy, I know that the shoulder has to move, right? So there's like 10 pistons pointing into this from every direction that allows me to get the same range of motion in the shoulder as a human shoulder would. But I'm really coming at this, when I made this guy, I bought a Yamaha engine off Turbo Squid. That's his torso. And then I found a bunch of, I went on an engineering website, right, where they just have STLs of stuff that they use to like CAD things, that they use to make their products. And I downloaded those and I made those. And so I built him out of those. So essentially what I'm saying is, that was his story, right? His story was that he had to be clunky and he had to be not super, not really futuristic sci-fi. But I think that's an example of where he's a robot, but my construction of him is purely anatomical. I'm just not going, oh, well, I need to make a piston that is like the gastrocnemius muscle, right? That's this muscle through here, for example. Or or I need to make a piston that's exactly like the pecs. That's garbage. That's not going to get me anywhere. So when I'm doing a creature, I'm thinking, what is this guy's story? Not just, would it be cool that he has long arms? Why does he have long arms? And anatomically, how would that work? And in order to be able to think of something like that, you need to have the freedom to work, which means you have to understand at least the basic mechanics of anatomy. And if you just, there's always the temptation to just go, oh, well, like it's an ogre, right? So I'm just going to work with my human anatomy, and then maybe the shoulder muscles might be a bit bigger and whatever. And there you're always, you have your anatomy book, and you're trapped to that. You don't have freedom. You can't do what you want with it. And my thinking of anatomy is all about freedom. And so when I'm studying the human figure, I'm using it not as a trap to be like, well, I have to copy that. No, it's a lesson to me, and this comes back to I guess what I've been talking about a lot. Like, for example, how many times will I see the quadriceps muscles, right? So we have these two muscles through here. This is vastus medialis, vastus lateralis. Rectus femoris will come in the middle. How many times have I seen them put on a single plane like this, time and time and time again? No, this one on the inside is lower. This one on the outside is higher. They have this is a much more interesting story, and I know it's maybe pretentious to use story in terms of just these two muscles, but it is. That's the personality of them. That's, if I'm going to caricature them like a street artist would, I'm really going to exaggerate that. Gastrocnemius, this muscle in the back. Similarly, how many times have I seen this? People understand that it's made of like two separate heads, right? So we see this kind of coffee bean sculpt, and how many times have I seen two exact same shapes? But if you're conditioning your mind right, you go, no, that's not acceptable, that's not natural, that's not believable. So what is it? What can you give me that hits those beats? Well, again, right, higher on the outside, they're not the same. This head moves very sharply through here. This one moves very softly on the outside through here. So similar ideas, different, like cool. Like brothers or sisters, right?
Yeah. So
and then through here, giving way to fat. Again, a different movement, a different story. Sorry, Manny. Yeah, go ahead with your question.
So Andres is asking, so everything comes from references, not from your head, not from your I'm assuming he's mentioning just like, imagination.
No, the opposite, man. The opposite, yeah. So I'll start a concept 2D.
Yeah, not inventing your own anatomy. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, I'm inventing it. Yeah, I'm inventing, but I'm inventing it as well. Like, like, so this is done from reference, but in order for me to accurately depict the whole thing, that's maybe going to take hours and hours. And this sculpt is, I don't know, 6 hours worth of work or something like that. So I have to make it up. I can't. So I have to pick and choose what I want from the model. So yes, I'm inventing because I'm the master of it. The model is not in control of me. I'm in control of the model. Same with reference, right? So to use a concept as an example, I will start just with shapes, just with silhouettes. I'm starting as the master, right? And then I'm potentially bringing in reference. But when I'm using reference, normally, so that robot I showed you before, to get into that world, I spent half a day just studying Boston Dynamics robots, just drawing them, getting into their world, understanding what it is, what's their aesthetic, what's their world. But I'm not making their world, I'm making mine, and I'm the master of that, not Google, right, who now own Boston Dynamics. So I get their DNA into my system, and then I splurge it out. And so same with anatomy. I've now studied and taught anatomy for enough years that it's obviously part of my DNA. So no, I'm not using reference, but ultimately I will use reference to finalize my work. And like I said at the start, you need to do both. You need to use reference and you need to throw it away because you're the master of it. So when I've got something that I know is mine and that no one is taking away from me, then I'm going back to my reference and I'm saying, what can you give me? And I'm going to steal a little bit more. So I don't remember the question, Manny, but I think it was generally like, am I inventing anatomy? And
yeah.
Yes, but like I say, even on a human, I'm inventing anatomy because if not, what are you, man? Like a machine, just copying what you see, and then So like, what if you want to do a dog-like creature? Do you just copy a dog and then adjust it? No, that's not. That you can't get your heart into it that way. So you have to. I was going to say you have to get inside a dog. You don't. You don't have to. You don't. Please don't
get
do that.
Inside
But
of a dog, please.
That's if you take one thing away from this webinar, please let it be that. But you have to understand that world, and then you're free, right? Like I'm doing this hyena for a thing at the moment. You can't find hyena like anatomy reference, right? You can maybe find a couple of drawings of a skeleton, but I don't know if I can trust those. So I have to look at a hyena and I have to understand the shape, the structure, the story of that hyena's body, and then I can take my knowledge of quadruped anatomy and kind of put it into there. So
exactly.
yeah, freedom is the goal.
Great. So for the class, are you doing paint overs, or are you actually sculpting on top of the students' models? Someone wants to know.
Yeah, it's sculpting right on top of it. So basically, what we'll do is the first week of the class, and we don't touch human anatomy. That's where I give them bones, and I say, look, a muscle starts from point A, finishes at point B. When it contracts, it pulls that point to that point, and I talk about the kind of aesthetics that that we touched on in a very loose way at the start. I talk about that in a lot more depth, and then I go, look, just here's some bones that I made up. Go and make something out of that to kind of understand how anatomy basically functions. Then after that, then we study human anatomy. And so the full 10-week course, we're basically, we study the torso and then the arms and so on, the hands, the legs, the feet, we bolt on a little bit each week. And then we study fat and different body types and stuff like that. And then at the end, we finalize it, but we also throw it away and do like a 3-hour speed sculpt. And man, like it's not unusual that those speed sculpts are better than the sculpt they spent 10 weeks on, because they've then got it a little bit more into their bones, into their DNA, and so they're then building more freely. And this I think also relates to what we were talking about a while ago in terms of the ways to learn, and ways to learn is just to just keep on doing that. Just keep on testing yourself with speed sculpts.
So how long, someone wants to know, how long has it taken you to get to the level you're at now? Like, how long have you been studying this for?
So I was at university, and there I was jumping all over the place. I didn't know whether I was going to animate or matte paint or whatever. But towards the end, I got this obsession with anatomy. When I really started my anatomy studies, and then and so that was 12 years ago or something like that. So 12 years maybe. It's I think that the thing is this stuff is hard, and it takes so much time. But what my hope is as a teacher, and I take that teaching role seriously, is that I can make that a little bit faster, maybe for my students. Hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that I went into. But yeah, I think whatever my level is just through this this very, very painful process, and you have to really learn to enjoy that journey. When I was starting out on it, I would be looking up to other people, but consumed with like jealousy, like why are my sculpts not like their sculpts? And I was unable to enjoy other people's work because I was so upset that mine wasn't at that quality. And I think I see this sometimes in my students as well, and very, very important that you let that go, so that you have the energy to keep on doing this for as long as it takes. Maybe for you guys it doesn't take as long as it took me. Maybe it takes half the time. Maybe it takes twice the time. Ultimately, none of that will matter as long as you can find someone who's willing to pay you to do it, and you can keep on finding ways to enjoy that journey. So those things are very, very important.
Cool. Yeah. And so and since you've done traditional sculpting, you still kind of do it now, sculpture work. What medium are you using? What type of tools are you using?
I use water-based clay. Well, so for my students on the sculpture course, that's all done in water-based clay, which for me, because that's how I learned that's the material that I learned sculpture in. That's the most natural for me. I'm not particularly comfortable with oil-based stuff, and my tools are like I'll use just like a rake tool and a little wooden spatula. I think a B5 from Tarantes, if you want to look it up. But a little spatula for a little wooden tool for applying clay, and then like a kidney or even like a credit card sometimes for finalizing the surface. But I'm not big into tools. And actually, for my Ecoche students, Ecoche is studying just a sculpt from the bones up. So you literally sculpt the bones and then sculpt the muscles. Those guys do work in oil-based clay, and for that, we didn't get any of the like Chavant or any of the expensive stuff. We just got a bunch of kids plasticine from the toy shop down the road, and it works fine. Yeah, I'm not big into the. So some people are very it matters a lot to them what materials they use, and that's just different mindsets. For me, I don't. And weirdly, having learned my craft in clay, but spent countless more hours in ZBrush because that was my job. I work in clay like I work in ZBrush. One of my students said that to me the other day. Like he was doing a life-size torso and like his first one, so was really scared, really moving step by step. And I was just like, well, working like I do here. Like maybe this isn't working, so let's just smooth it out and smash it again, And he was like, dude, you're treating my sculpt like it's a ZBrush thing, and that's been an amazing lesson for me from ZBrush. Is clay is just mud, man, and in ZBrush, man, I can undo and save or use a morph target or whatever. So the fearlessness that I get from working digitally is a massive bonus that I try and get into my clay students.
Cool. How much time would you say you spend sketching and drawing? Just in general.
Not so much now, actually. I'll go through phases where I'm like, God damn, I need to remember how to draw properly, especially since I'm teaching it. But yeah, certainly not as much as I'd like to. Like, I always at the start of the concept phase, and maybe 40-50% of my time nowadays is doing concepts, and that will always start 2D. But yeah, actually just getting my pencil out and sketching, not as much as I should. I think that's the main answer. The thing is when I was studying sculpture, we would sculpt for 3 hours a day, draw for 3 hours a day. This is the same format as well that we teach at the Barcelona Academy of Art, and drawing is very much the foundation for the sculpture approach, and so a lot of the time when I'm sculpting, I'm drawing, right? It's not, it's a different quality of line. But here, for example, right? So these are my perineal muscles, for example. So it looks like I'm missing the soleus. Let's just draw that in, and then this will be extensor digitorum longus, tibialis anterior. So I draw a lot, So in clay, I do this constantly, just with a knife, just to figure out all of my shapes, so that I don't, because it takes time to put clay on and take it off, even if you're a little bit, fast and loose with it like I am. So I draw to make sense of it, and then I work into it. So the actual process of drawing, not that long, and that's visible incidentally in my drawings. Like my drawings are accurate and anatomical, but the actual technique is not as high as like someone who's a professional painter, for example, because that actual working with whatever the material is, pen or charcoal or whatever, you have to master that technique, and I don't think that I would say that about myself. But ultimately, if you can sculpt, there's always this conversation about, do you need to draw to be able to sculpt? No, man. If you can sculpt, you can sculpt. If you can draw, you can draw. But it's mad to disassociate the two. They're part of the same language, right? So if you can sculpt, I guarantee you can draw. I guarantee it. It's just that maybe you don't have the technique with the pencil or the technique with the charcoal. But the language is one and the same. So for me, I'm not drawing every day. So sorry, to answer the question, how much do I do it? Probably like half an hour to an hour a week actually drawing, unless I'm in the 2D stage of a concept, in which case 9 to 5 every day or longer. But I spend a lot longer than that sculpting. And if I'm doing a sculpt like this, and I don't know how noticeable it's been to watch me work on it, but basically I sculpt, I smooth, I sculpt, I smooth. So just this very kind of basic sculpture of a lower leg through here. I've already drawn that lower leg 10 times in this process. Right, so I'm still going through that. So the amount of time I actually spend working doing this stuff, rather than drawing, is basically every second I can get with having a family and actually having to be a supervisor and run a company and stuff. So
cool.
It's as many hours as I can squeeze in.
Cool. So Andre is asking, so when just understanding, kind of getting into anatomy, is it always best to start from the deepest parts of the anatomy? And I'm assuming he's referring to starting with the skeletal structure, or start from the skin, then the muscle.
No, the deepest, man. I understand what you're saying. Like, start with the skin because on the skin is what you see. But no. Your first thing, right? So here's a basic rib cage, right? Rib cage is basically an egg shape. It's kind of flattened from front to back. And people who haven't studied anatomy, they can't sculpt the back. They really struggle with that. So here's the thing. Right, this is one really important. So what we're looking at is a back here. Let me throw in a couple of scapulas to maybe make this a little bit more clear. Okay, so this is a back. Right now, what happens on the back? You see that M shape there? That's the big shape of the back, man. Because what's happening is the ribs are coming around here. Then they turn into the spine. The spine is buried in the body. It's not like hanging off the body like a lot of people visualize it. It's really coming in. By the way, the rib cage, make sure you don't make that straight up and down or you're dead. It's like this, it's forward. But yeah, spine buried within the body, ribs turn within that. So here is my basic conception for the back. And I think what most people do when they do a back is they kind of see it as a plane, and they open their anatomy book and they see like the trapezius, right, which will be coming up through here into the neck, the latissimus, which will be coming here. So they go, wow, those muscles are big. They must be really important. So they draw these onto a plane. And those muscles, guys, the personality of those muscles is that they are thin, whereas the personality of, for example, the serratus muscle that just people don't bother understanding, that's rounded. The serratus muscle is, what the athletic male figure has to give it that V shape. So serratus or lumbar muscles, right, running through here, big rounded sort of cylinders through there, rhomboids through here, teres major coming off the bottom through here. These are the big forms. So you've got to work from the big forms up, because basically, like, from here, if I know we've gone 15 minutes over, if I had 10 more minutes, I swear to God, I could make a back sculpt that looked kind of convincing-ish, but it would only work based off of this big movement, right? And then going to the smaller movement. So the skeleton is the biggest movement. So you start with that, and then you go to the big muscles. So like this muscle here, that's the teres major. That's fairly big, right? Now the teres minor through here, forget about it, really. Like, I see it sculpted a lot because people see it, and they see that as the advanced level of anatomy, right? When you know those little muscles, that's when you really know your stuff. No, you know your stuff when you don't care about those muscles anymore, and you can just kiss them goodbye and worry about the big forms. The story, teres major, big and rounded, infraspinatus, broader but flat. Playing those ideas off against each other. Now, when I throw in the trapezius or the latissimus, now they sit, comfortably within the forms. So yes, starting from your bones, working your big forms, and going up from there.
Cool. And we're definitely on that time, but any parting notes, and sorry guys, I didn't get to all your questions. It's like, I know we have like about 6 or 7 questions we didn't get to, but just parting notes, Christian, in terms of any advice for for any of the participants moving forward and their exploration of understanding anatomy.
Okay. So moving forwards, yeah, I think always try and keep your brain engaged when you're doing it. This is teaching in atelier is a problem that I have with a lot of students, where they're just able to copy, and it's almost meditative. They turn their brains off and they just copy. You want to be engaged. So if you're drawing to study your anatomy, which by the way I recommend that you do, then draw it. By all means, open up an anatomy book and and copy out some things that you know of the muscles that you want to study. But once you've copied them out, don't forget to go through and label them, because in that process you turn this abstract concept that you've just copied this form, you turn that abstract concept into an idea. Constantly try and engage with yourself. Constantly bring yourself to your studies, right? And if you're studying with a teacher, even better, right? If I'm studying with a live model, I'm in my head saying to the model or saying to the reference, give me everything that you have to give. And if you don't, I'm going to steal it, and I need to get to that skill level where I can do that. If I have a teacher, then I'm paying probably to learn from that person, so I can actively ask them and steal from them. So if you do that, then amazing, and make sure that you do. I really wish that I could teach anatomy by just lecturing and just pointing out this kind of stuff, and I can't. You can't learn this stuff by just sitting there and being unengaged. You have to really actively engage yourself. So you could let's say you could do my course and just watch the videos, and then you could do another course and just watch those videos, and you can be like, I've been watching anatomy for 20 hours. I must understand it. No, you probably don't. So test your understanding, like we said before, with speed sculpt, but also with drawings, right? We did touch on this very briefly. Should you draw? Should you sculpt? The advantage of drawing is you can do it much faster. So if I want to figure out the proportions of the human body, it's going to take me a long time to sculpt all of those. But Manny, can you still hear me? The sound's all gone quiet.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh yeah, you're back now. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if I want to figure out the proportions, okay, cool. If I want to figure out the proportions of the body, I can do this, right? This has taken me no time at all to draw out this figure, and then I can analyze this afterwards and see how close I was, right? To sculpt that same figure would have taken me, like an hour. So certainly, use drawing because it's a faster way of learning, and analyze your work afterwards and actively engage your brain at all times.
Cool. Perfect. Well, that's our time. Christian, thank you so much. It's you're obviously really passionate about it's like being an instructor and really good at it. So thank you so much for your time. And everybody, thank you so much for participating in another live session. We're going to have another one next week with Ballistic Publishing. They're going to be rolling out the awards for some of the Grand Masters for the Expose 12 book that's coming out. So we'll be sending out some newsletters for that. I've sent you guys a link to Christian's class. Definitely, check it out. Also check out some of the student gallery and the student work that's, been done in that class over the years. Absolutely amazing stuff. So Christian, thank you so much again for your time, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Manny, for running it. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been great.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. Courtney, Andre, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by. You guys have a great weekend. And for those of you guys who are already enjoying it, it's like, have fun. All right. Take care.
Cheers.